Hello and welcome, fellow digital soldiers, to True Reporting. It is the 24th of August, and on today's podcast, we'll be covering an article coming from the New York Times, the deep state arm, and it says here, ahead of G7, which Trump is there now meeting with all world leaders, Trump has asserted that he can force U.S. companies to leave China. My friends, a ton is going on with China, as you saw in the intro video with what's taking place in Hong Kong. The light is spreading, and there are over 1 billion people in China, a lot of people to awaken underneath this communist regime, and shall see that as time progresses. I will be following up more and more on this article. I have a lot that I've gone over with executive orders, what is taking place with these companies that are overseas with China. There's a lot of big time events that are taking place that I think Trump is going to have to pull the trigger on. But before we get into that, my friends, would you please welcome my sponsor, Noble Gold. Hey guys, Thomas from True Reporting here. Did you know that gold is up 18%? That's right. It's been like that since the month of June, and we all know why. It's because Trump is relentless against the Federal Reserve. We know that our money is not worth anything unless it's backed by gold. So why not back your 401k or IRA with gold and go to Noble Gold and tell them Thomas sent you from True Reporting. You call this number 1-877-646-5347 and tell them Thomas sent you, and it'll be worth your while. Thanks guys, and enjoy the podcast. All right, guys, so from France, it says President Trump asserted on Saturday that he has the authority to make good on his threat to force all American businesses to leave China, citing a national security law that has been used mainly to target terrorists, drug traffickers, and pariah states like Iran, Syria, and North Korea. So obviously, we're reading a deep state article. It's from the New York Times, and they are the arm of the deep state because they're part of the mainstream media. We all know that. Basically what they're saying here is they're putting words on President Trump, saying that he is saying China is on the same level, that he has to use this national security law because China's on the same level as targeted terrorists, drug traffickers, and pariah states like Iran, Syria, and North Korea, which is not true. The only thing that is true about this is that there is a deep state within China. There's a faction that is still in China, and that would be the communist regime, right? So he's trying to pull these companies out because, again, we have the lowest taxation pretty much on the planet, much lower than China. And why aren't they leaving? Why are they there to begin with? They're there to begin with, Google, so on and so forth, because they're the adversary. They're become adversaries of America because they're working alongside with the deep state of China, not necessarily the President Xi. I'm talking about this regime, this communist regime that they try to place on us with the censorship of conservatives. We see here, as he arrives in France for the annual meeting of the Group of Seven Powers, Mr. Trump posted a message on Twitter citing the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, a law meant to enable a president to isolate criminal regimes, but not intended to be used to cut off economic ties with a major trading partner because of disagreements over tariffs. And he says, in quote, for all the fake news reporters that don't have a clue as to what the law is relative to presidential powers, China, etc., try looking at the Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, Mr. Trump wrote, case closed. And again, guys, why is Google over there? Why are they there, right? They're taking away jobs from Americans. Why didn't they just stay here? Because they are also deep state. They are also the arm of the deep state. And they are adversaries. They've become, because of that, they are adversaries of America. And Trump's going to have to pull out the big guns. He's going to have to use this International Emergency Economic Powers Act to really put some fire up under their ass, right? That's what's going to happen. The president's tweets could further unsettle American companies that still conduct an enormous amount of business with China and amid a trade war that has already strained ties. Oh, what do we get from China? This cheap furniture, these just garbage amenities that we get from over there, that they have slave labor. They're not paid anything. These people are slaves under a communist regime. We have to cut ties with them. If we do, we are the piggy bank. Let's be honest. China is deflating, guys, because they're losing so much money with these tariffs. It has to be done. They are seizing. Trump is not necessarily taking out China. He's seizing the assets of the deep state. The deep state is the one that's pulling in all this money. They're enslaving these people, bringing in American companies to go over there that are now adversaries, correct? This is what they're doing. He's seizing the money, not necessarily from China and their hardworking people, but from the deep state that runs China, from within, correct? I agree. It said stock markets fell sharply on Friday after Mr. Trump raised the prospect of cutting off trade altogether. The threat came after the Chinese government said it would raise tariffs on American goods in retaliation for the latest levies imposed by Mr. Trump on the $300 billion in Chinese imports. Mr. Trump vowed hours later to raise tariffs further. He's not backing down. He's not going to back down whatsoever. And if the Chinese government does raise tariffs, then they do. Then they do. That's not President Xi doing this. This is the deep state. That's what they're doing. It's a back and forth moves and counter moves. Under the weight of Mr. Trump's tariff war, China has already fallen from America's largest trading partner last year to third largest this year. China's Commerce Ministry issued a strongly worded statement on Saturday evening warning the United States to turn back from ever-escalating confrontation. Again, this is not China. This is the deep state within China. But it did not threaten any new trade measures. And we could see here from a Chinese statement said, right? So vague. This unilateral and bullying trade protectionism and extreme pressure violate the consensus of the heads of state of China and the United States that violate the principles of mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefit, seriously undermining the material of the multilateral trading system and the normal international trade order. Well, no, because China, deep state of China, has been stealing all of our jobs, not necessarily stealing, but the former presidents and so on and so forth that sold American jobs to Mexico, that sold American jobs over to China, overseas, and they've given away. That's why factories went under. This isn't China. This is the deep state, the worldwide deep state that is pulling the strings on this, correct? China warned that the United States would suffer as a result. Yeah, right. The Chinese said strongly urges the U.S. side not to misjudge the situation, not to underestimate the determination of the Chinese people, and to immediately stop the wrong approach. Otherwise, all consequences will be borne by the U.S., the statement added. In raising the possibility of forcing American businesses to pull out of China on Friday, Mr. Trump framed it as not a request, but as an order he already issued, because he will take all the money from the deep state, guys. That's what he will do. Our great American companies are hereby ordered to immediately start looking for an alternative to China, including bringing our companies home and making your products in the USA. He wrote on Twitter, adding, "We don't need China, and frankly, we would be far better without them." And we would. We are the piggy bank. Our economy is booming. Our taxes are the lowest. Come here, right? We will be the biggest exporter, if we not are already, with oil, with goods, with anything that's going out of this country. Let's just be honest, guys. Everything is going to be made in America. It's not going to be made in China. Your clothes, your furniture, your so on and so forth that you buy, guys. It's not going to be that any further because the deep state is being squeezed out. It says here, in fact, aide said no order has been drawn up, nor was it clear that he would attempt to do so. Instead, it could be the latest negotiating tactic by a president who favors drastic threats without always following through on them in hopes of forcing partners to make concessions. And Andy Mock, a trade and geopolitical analyst at the Center for China and Globalization in Beijing, said that the Chinese government was coolly assessing the latest American actions. In quote, he says, in negotiations, and especially in high-stakes negotiations, the side that reacts emotionally generally is the side that does not do well, he said. The U.S. side is approaching this from a more emotional side, while China is more calm and calculating. Yeah, right. Mr. Trump's threat to invoke the 1977 Act to force companies to leave China would be his most recent unorthodox use of authorities that Congress delegated to the presidency for exigent circumstances. He's just alpha. That's all that this is. The president previously threatened to use emergency powers to impose tariffs on Mexican goods, which he did, unless the Mexican government did more to stop migrants from illegally entering the United States. He backed off after Mexico promised to take tougher action. Right, he pushed them into a corner, and they submitted. His effort to emergency powers could also be challenged in court, given the restrictions surrounding it when it can be invoked. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act says that if the president decides that circumstances abroad have created, in quote, any unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, or economy of the United States, the president can declare a national emergency. We're well aware of that. This triggers special authority for the leader to regulate any transactions in foreign exchange by Americans. The law has passed to define a restrained presidential power, which until then had been seen by critics as interpreted too expansively. It has served ever since as the main source of authority for presidents to sanction other countries or individuals in response to specific national security threats, such as the Iranian hostage crisis that began in 1979. As of March 1st, presidents had declared 54 national emergencies under the law, of which 29 were still active, according to the Congressional Research Service. Among others, presidents have used it to target international terrorists, drug kingpins, human rights abusers, cyber attackers, illegal armed proliferators, and multinational criminal organizations. You understand the wording of this, correct? Like, they're putting China on that level, but they're saying it that Trump is doing this on his own. It's not true. It's going after the Chinese deep state. Presidents relied on the law's authority when Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, when Serbia troops were sent into Kosovo in 1998, and when Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. Among the countries targeted at various points over the years have been international outliers like North Korea, Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, Syria, Congo, and Venezuela. Seeking to use it in a trade dispute with a country like China would be a drastic departure from its history. But Mr. Trump is President Trump. Could make the argument that China's theft of intellectual property constitutes a national security threat akin to cyber attacks or other nonviolent attacks on American sovereignty. China's not doing that. It's the deep state, right? And here we can see many of this is the Chinese laborers that get paid 19 cents to work 19 hours, right? This is what they do. This is communism, guys. We will never be under a communist regime ever. But they want to implement that on America. Mr. Trump came to the office criticizing President Barack Obama for abusing his executive authority, but has himself asserted new and creative ways of taking action that his predecessors never used. Among other things, he invoked a related national emergency law to finance parts of his proposed wall along the Mexican border. Even though Congress explicitly refused to authorize the money, so far, Mr. Trump has successfully rebuffed legal challenges to that decision, and I'm thankful for that. Speaking with reporters before leaving Washington for France, Mr. Trump, President Trump, New York Times, come on, made clear of how much of a priority his trade war with China has become for his presidency. In quotes, he says, "This is more important than anything else that we're working on, just about," he said. But he brushed off the stock market drop in reaction to his statements on Friday, saying he was, in quote, "not at all responsible, and besides, the markets have gone up substantially since he took office. So don't talk to me about 600 points, he said, minimizing the drop in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. And we all know that the stock markets are just, they're buttons being pushed, guys. Who controls the stock market? Who controls these entities, these businesses, right? Who controls that big board? You tell me. I'm telling you, it's not legitimate. There's no legitimacy to it. My friends, we are winning. Let's just say that. We are winning bigly. Hong Kong's waking up, as you saw from the intro video. You are seeing the Lord. You're seeing the light take over. This is a tiny spark that will spread to over 1 billion people within China. They need to be relieved of their communist takeover, this lifestyle that they live is so looming and depressing, and it's awful for people. They don't need to live that way. And if we can get the Great Awakening over there, which we're seeing Pepe being tagged on concrete and with so on and so forth, and we're seeing the movement slowly but surely move into this vast amount of population, is going to be fantastic. I will stay on top of this, my friends. I have so many good threads that back up this emergency act that he's going to do, this international emergency act, that he is going to take out these companies, bring them home, get the deep state out of China. It's all taking place right here, right now. So my friends, if you found this informative and you enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel. You can follow me on Twitter at TRUreporting. Don't forget to leave a like. You can donate to this channel by going to my PayPal, my Patreon. We also have a P.O. Box and TRUreporting merch. Please take advantage of all of those and keep this channel afloat. Guys, I hope you have a wonderful weekend and expect a very good podcast coming out tonight. I will talk to you all very soon. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.